Don't tell me that the moon is shining. Show me the glint of light on broken glass. Hello, and welcome to Shining Moon, a speculative fiction podcast, episode 4. I'm your host, Deborah L. Davitt. Today we'll continue our series by asking questions about speculative poetry. We'll talk a little about the history of speculative poetry, what it takes to write genre poetry and regular poetry, and where you can find poetry in the wild. My guests today are Elgin-winning poet Amelia Gorman, Michelle Muenzler, and Lynne Sargent. Truth be told, I owe a lot of my success as a writer to Michelle getting me started with the submission grinder and telling me that poetry could actually be written and sold in the modern age. So let's start with some introductions. Amelia Gorman lives in Eureka, where she spends her free time exploring forests and tide pools and fostering dogs. Her fiction appears in Nightscript 6 and Cellar Door. Read her poetry in Dreams and Nightmares, Penumbric, and Vestarian. Her chapbook, The Elgin-winning Field Guide to Invasive Species of Minnesota, which is wonderful, and I recommend that everybody go get a copy now, is available from Interstellar Flight Press. Her micro-chapbook, The Warm Sonnets, is available from the Quarter Press. Hi, Amelia. Welcome to the podcast, and thank you for being on.
Hello, I'm looking forward to this.
Michelle Muenzler is an author of the weird and sometimes poet. Though rarely seen outside of her cave, she can be lured into visibility with offers of food and drink. She is also owned by 3 cats, one of whom would make a terrible human, but she loves him anyway. Hi, Michelle. Thank you for being on. We are having a little bit of audio problems with Michelle, but be patient with us. We'll get this all upgraded in post if necessary. Lynne Sargent is a writer, aerialist, and holds a PhD in applied philosophy. They are the poetry editor at Utopia Science Fiction magazine. Their work has been nominated for Riesling, Elgin, and Aurora Awards and has appeared in such venues as Augur Magazine, Strange Horizons, and Daily Science Fiction. To find out more, visit them at scribbledshadows.wordpress.com. Right, so let's talk about the history of speculative poetry. I personally think that anything that involves a monster should, or flights of fancy, should pretty much be considered speculative by default. But a lot of literary people would say, but if that's in the canon of Western literature, we can't include Beowulf in that. We can't include the Iliad and the Odyssey there. I look at stuff written by Lucian Samosata, who talked about trips to the moon in the 2nd century AD. He did it as a satire, but he managed to invent science fiction over 1800 years ago as sort of a byproduct of making fun of philosophers. Where do you start the history of speculative fiction or speculative genre poetry, as it might be? Where do you think it starts? And I'm going to pick on Lynne.
Well, I'm gonna start off, I guess, I don't know, being a little bit contrary. So I'm one of those horrid speculative poets that doesn't actually believe that there is such a thing as speculative poetry, or that it's like distinct in any way from non-genre poetry.
I love that.
So I'm definitely with you, Deborah, in that I think that the historical stuff is definitely speculative in nature. At least in part because I think that all poetry is speculative in nature, but I also think that stuff like the Iliad, like a lot of like Tennyson's Arthurian poetry, a lot of Shakespeare, all that stuff, I think would fall under a modern speculative canon as well for people that are a little bit pickier about those distinctions. And that's certainly what I grew up reading and grew up loving, and was what informed my poetry practice from the very start.
All right. Amelia, do you have any thoughts on this?
Yeah, I actually kind of agree with Lynne. Someone said on your first podcast that like one thing speculative is a marketing term. And without sounding too jaded, I would say in a lot of ways, speculative poetry only sort of exists as speculative fans exist. It's it's sci-fi poetry is poetry for sci-fi fans. Fantasy poetry is poetry for fantasy fans. And that includes these ancient poems. You know, Beowulf obviously is a huge one. All the old monster poems. At least I love them as a fantasy fan. So
yeah, it's hard not to. All right. I would normally ask, do people really pay you to write this? But the answer is yes. So I'm going to skip that question. And I'm going to ask instead, why do you write poetry? And I'm going to start with Lynn again.
I write poetry because I don't know how to not write poetry. I always tell this story that like the first time I wrote a poem, it was for a book report in high school, and it was for a book report on a speculative book. And at that, I started and I just didn't stop. You know, like if I don't write things down, they're gonna knock around in my head, and I'm never gonna be able to sleep at night. So it's just got to happen.
Amelia, why do you write poetry?
yeah, I think you're gonna get a lot of like, because I have to. For me, it's just such a fundamental way of how I process emotions. So I mean, even with the more abstracted poems, like are still very much me processing relationships with people in my life. A lot of processing other things I've read that have moved me by writing about them myself.
We may as well move on to our next question, which is, where can people find speculative poetry in the wild? What are some of your favorite venues that you've been published in or that you just like to read? I'm going to start with Amelia.
One of my all-time favorites would definitely be the poetry that Strange Horizons publishes. They do such a cool job, like very interesting questions. They're not afraid to do kind of weird visual things with the poetry they publish. There's just really some like cutting edge, neat stuff of how poetry can exist on the internet.
Oh yeah, there was a recent poem by, I want to say, Daniel Osima that was animated. And the animation added so much to the actual poem that I can't imagine just trying to read it straight on a page. It was beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
And that was in Strange Horizons.
Yeah.
Lynn, what's one of your favorite venues?
So I'm definitely partial to places like Uncanny and Augur. Fantasy, unfortunately, of course, is closing, but I think they published some really great stuff while they were around. Just like different perspectives, like some lovely, lots of diversity. Like I like to read different things. And so it's nice to see sort of like the spectrum of, longer poems, shorter poems, some form stuff, some not form stuff, different subject matters. Mm-hmm. I'm also a big fan, honestly, of if you're looking for collections, Interstellar Flight Press has quite a few lovely collections out, including Amelia's, but
Brandon O'Brien is amazing.
Yeah. Can you say? I love Brandon. Brandon's like one of my favorite spec poets. But yeah, so like they've got some really great, I guess, do they have any like multi-author collections yet, or is it just single author collections so far?
I think only their fiction. They have it's their nonfiction even, like their best of Interstellar Flight Press magazine, but that's just nonfiction pieces.
I guess something we'll have to suggest to Holly in the future then is to pull together a multi-author collection for Interstellar.
Yeah, that would be really cool. Michelle, if you're with us, what are some of your favorite venues to find speculative poetry in the wild?
Yeah, like if I'm going for collections, Interstellar Flight Press is a great place to go, as already mentioned. Other than that, I just like to kind of flit around to magazines like, Strange Horizons or Penumbric, Vestarian, just, kind of random, actually.
All right. I would like to give a shout out to Aqueduct Press because they recently published a set of poems by me. And I know that they also have recently published Numinous Stones by Holly Lynn Walrath. So I know that they definitely do publish speculative poetry. And
they
they
also
are
did
wonderful, and they are very supportive of their authors. So if you want to check them out, they definitely do publish some really good poetry.
they have the poetry inspired by Ursula K. Le Guin book too, the multi-author collection, which
Climbing lightly through forests.
isn't all speculative, but obviously so many of the poems are a response to her sci-fi work.
Right. So I'm going to go ahead and let you guys a little bit off the leash here, and I want you each to read one of your own poems, and then we'll get to talk with you a little bit about it. And that's something that's a rare delight, is to be able to ask an author what they were thinking when they were writing something, what they meant by the words, and just to go forward from that. And I know that Lynn has The Wolf of Your Passions, which appeared in Augur issue 5.2 in November of 2022. Would you like to start us off?
Sure. The Wolf of Your Passions. Perhaps getting to love requires a few wrong turns, going off the garden path so you might stumble into the wolf of your passions. Eating a few poisoned apples and therefore learning which drug brings you satisfaction. Trying on a few tight-laced corsets proffered by a myriad of witches, and after know which brings the deepest sleep. Following through that trap door to the place with gold and silver trees bearing fruits like jewels, all of them yours when you have learned to step from the trodden path, to know yourself, to speak your wants, even the monstrous ones.
I love this poem. I read it before when you sent it to me, and hearing you read it, it just gives it so much more life. Thank you for sharing it. What gave you the inspiration for this poem?
So I definitely find myself running over fairy tales a lot. I think I heard this described by Gabrielle K one time in a talk as authors have cats. They just little obsessions that they keep coming back to. And so fairy tales are definitely one of mine. And I think I had maybe been reading Tanith Lee's Redder Than Blood at this point. And so I think she's got a great story in that's like a threesome between Little Red and the Wolf and Granny.
Oh my.
I love Tanith Lee. Anyways, so I was thinking about that, and all these sort of fairy tale retellings that it's why are certain things bad? Why do parents caution their children away from certain things when it is sort of possible to want things that are kind of bad for you sometimes? And that's something that we're allowed to choose for ourselves as adults, is to do things that are maybe slightly dangerous sometimes, or that can be dangerous if they're not in controlled circumstances, and then we can finagle ways to make them safer and enjoy these things that are taboo, right? We can have weird sex, we can do drugs, and that's what this poem is about.
All right, Amelia, you did not share a poem with me ahead of time, but are you ready to read something?
Yeah, I thought I did. I said I was going to do the Eye to the Telescope one, but yeah, I'm going to read The Dead Knocking from July 2023's Eye to the Telescope. The Dead Knocking. I'm not going to be one of those women who doesn't open the door when the dead come knocking. I'm not going to end a story when it's beginning. I'll let that corpse inside, no matter how many of its fingers have fallen off, no matter how shattered the femurs that lean against the boards, or how bloodless by disease, or bloodied by machinery. I'm not going to be one of those women held back from the door where the dead are pounding, where their mealy fists are bashing through the wood. I'll be there to offer them coffee, or meat, or rigid chairs. Oh, my sister, oh, my father, oh, my neighbor dead yesterday, or 20 years now this past Tuesday. Not even the kind of woman who pulls it open a crack, cheap peeks before deciding what's too ugly and what's allowed. No, I'm tossing that door open, a reverse slam, and I am letting all of the dead flood my hallway, and all their dead friends, none of us ending our story where it's beginning.
I love this poem. Thank you for sharing it. Again, what gave you the inspiration for this one?
I I picked this one to read because writing it was my frustration reading the story The Monkey's Paw by W.W. Jacobs, that classic family gets a monkey's paw and wishes, and they wish their son back to life, and then they wish him dead again. They realize they're going to be too horrified by him. And so in the spirit of speculative poetry, this is my poem about a speculative story, and that I didn't like it, that I wanted it to end different. I wanted to see the corpse. I wanted to, and kind of like Lynne Sargent's, I wanted to have sympathy for the more monstrous figures from stories.
Yeah, that all works perfectly, and it was a very evocative poem. I loved the repetition, which gave it such cadence as it moved through. It gave it forward motion that propelled you through the stanzas. I loved that.
Sure.
Michelle,
thinking of going with
can
There
you
Can
share
Only
a
Be
poem
One
with us?
Soul Princess, which was a penumbric speculative fiction magazine back in 2021. There can only be one soul princess. How many times did Mother tell me that? 100? 1,000? More than I can count for sure, more than the moons have seen. But if there can be only one, why must that one be me? Mother strokes my hair with a silver brush to keep the souls from straying. Mother spoons thistle milk down my throat to keep the souls from straying. Mother whistles out of tune and beats my thighs with birch to keep the souls from straying. Mother, 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 every day a different face, every day a different voice. Sometimes I wonder if she's still my mother anymore. I dreamt that I yet dream, and in that dream a soul rose up and with its last breath swallowed me whole and said to me, "Stupid girl, what's good's a dream? A true soul princess has no use for such wasteful things." Remember, Mother says, as she shoves me through the gate and into the arena, hungry souls crackling in my spine. Other girls cry at their gates, other girls scream, other girls grind their souls like blades against their meat. But all of us, from the meanest to the meek, know but this one thing. There can only be one soul princess come the end. Just the one, just the one, just the one.
Again, beautiful use of repetition, beautiful use of the juxtaposition between the beautiful and the terrifying. Again, I love this poem. What gave you the inspiration to write this one?
Number one, my dislike of chosen ones, because I always have an issue with like this one specific person being a chosen one. So I wanted to write a poem where a bunch of people are sort of this chosen one, but they're being groomed into it. And then that led into parental expectations and the ways that sometimes parents try to force their children down paths that their children don't want.
All right. Have any of you ever played in a poetry Thunderdome before? I know Michelle has, but have Amelia or Lynne?
Never.
Yes, I did one of your Thunderdomes, I think, for a Codex thing one time.
Yeah. So you know how it goes. It is going to be a three words, and then we are going to have 2 minutes, which I will edit out of, unless we think it's a good idea to leave 2 minutes of dead time so people at home can play along. I figure they can probably go ahead and just push the button and pause if they want to play along. So I'll edit out the 2 minutes of dead time, and then we'll produce beautiful, brilliant poetry in 2 minutes or less.
What's our usual tagline?
It will probably be highly amusing. And because we do not have a convention crowd here to make suggestions for us, I have instead a spreadsheet of words. And I have the traditional person, place, or thing, or I have noun, verb, adjective, and we'll probably try both. I'm going to ask each of you for a number between 1 and 30. So Amelia, give me a number between 1 and 30.
28.
28. Your noun is teaching. Lynn, what is
6.
your number between? I'm sorry?
6.
6. Sees. That's your verb.
26.
And Michelle, what's your number? 26? Faint. So our words are teaching, sees, and faint. We have 2 minutes to write it. And I will do that here in a second as I set up the the stopwatch. Beginning now. All right, pencils down. We're going to start with Amelia.
Okay. This poem is called How to Be a Woman in an Exorcism Story. Step 1, faint. This is the hardest part of the teaching. Don't hit your head. Put a delicate chaise beneath you, pillows piled high for a princess. Step 2, seize. Throw your body around the room, levitate, let your limbs go. Step 3, recover. Say the ghost is no longer in you, but lie if you need to.
I love this. I would never have thought of this.
Ending is sweet.
Lynn, could you go next?
Sure. Mine doesn't have a title because 2 minutes is not long enough to think of titles as well as poems.
I feel much the same way.
I'm definitely going through a phase where I'm like, sorry, go ahead.
Faint understanding hovers beyond the horizon. The universe teaching, regardless of if mathematics are real. We seize gravity, mythologize forces weak and strong alike. The stars as close as the next big discovery.
Ooh.
I love poems
Very nice.
I love poems that romanticize physics like that.
My husband is a physicist. My life is a constant act of romanticizing physics.
Sure. I am also untitled.
Michelle, can you go next?
Dark waters seize the lost. Faint voices failing ever fainter. Something slips against my leg. Another corpse, another voice now gone. Or something else, a lesson too late learned.
Ooh, very nice. That is dark and creepy, and you managed that in such a short amount of time.
Yeah.
Mine is not as good as yours. Seize the day, the ancient said, but what when the day grows faint and hard to grasp? What lesson could they teach us when time and space fade out of existence with nothing left to seize? Just to be stoic in the face of disillusion, or to be hedonistic in the face of the void? Or is there a third path, a way between, that leads to paradise? Right, so next round. We're going to do the traditional person, place, or thing. And we're going to have Michelle start us off with picking a number between 1 and 30. 19.
Oh,
that
ouch.
is... Oh, one of my favorites, used car salesman. All right. Amelia, could you pick a number between 1 and 13?
10.
Pompeii?
10. Pompeii.
Oh my God, you're killing me. Killing me, Deborah.
Pompeii, like where Vesuvius erupted. And Lynn.
27.
What, 27?
Yeah.
Glass. A glass or just glass in general? All right. I'm going to give you guys a moment to think about this because this one's going to be hard. All right. Begin. All right.
All right. Not
We're
sure
gonna
this
start
one
with
quite
Michelle
came
this time?
together. But let's go for it. No title again, because who wants titles? Only the cool people. Vesuvius erupts like a used car salesman, sputtering, the keys to my ride in hand. I was hoping to hit the road by now, be anywhere but here. But now the future is glass. Yeah. Yeah, that one kind of petered out.
Oh, I love the beginning. But
If
like
only it
that's
had
such a
gone.
punch to start with. It's great.
Oh,
Lynn,
sorry.
you want to
Just saying,
take
if
up
only it had gone somewhere.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, Michelle. Well, that's what the second draft is for. When you have more than 2 minutes. Lynn, you want to go next?
Sure. So, also untitled again. Disaster is sold. Disease by politicians like used car salesmen, as though Pompeii was necessary for Atlantis. Like volcanic glass is the same as magic gemstones. Like the Ouroboros of civilization's fall is an inescapable narrative certainty.
Ooh. You managed to get depth in 2 minutes. That's not fair. Amelia?
I blame the philosophy classes.
Okay, here's my untitled poem. We wanted to drive around the ruins, air conditioning on blast, looking at bodies scorched enough to be nearly glass, looking for the used car salesman of Pompeii, the rental of ruin. No tourists more gauche than us, radio on, convertible roof down, surrounded by fools and casts and stone.
Ooh.
I wanted to write about someone not likable.
Well, you succeeded, but they were self-aware enough to know that they weren't. So, that is interesting. Mine is, again, probably not as good as yours. Under the ashes of Pompeii, a broken bit of glass, the bones of people long gone. Can you hear the sound of chariots rattling past? The sound of voices as Marcus Paulinus, the used chariot salesman, calls people to come see what he has in stock. The sound of voices as prostitutes hawk their wares, as philosophers teach their students, all gone now under the hardened ash, a lesson to the future.
I was so melancholy.
Mm-hmm.
Pompeii makes me melancholy. All that information, all that culture, all that loss. But as an interesting side note, they have recently been able to sort of take some of the charred scrolls that were all bound up, and they've been able to read them using a very specialized spectrography. So they think that they'll be able to recover probably an entire library worth of ancient scrolls. So we might get back people that we never knew existed, or we might get back some of the full continuity of Sappho, for example, which would be really cool if they are able to continue doing this.
Super cool.
So I am excited about that. All right. On to our next round. We're going to go back to noun and verb adjectives, since you guys didn't like my used car salesman. All right. Amelia, start us off with picking a number between 1 and 30.
Let's go with 1.
1, alcohol. Lynn?
13.
React.
30.
And Michelle? Dashing. So that's alcohol, react, and dashing. And begin. All right. How do we do with this one?
Words.
Yeah, that's how I feel.
Oh, lucky me.
Michelle, you want to start us off again?
Untitled again. Add a drop to your goggles. Really, any alcohol will do. Watch the daring become dashing, a hormonal chain reaction of nothing to every dream. Apply with care. Effects, alas, may not last.
Amelia, you want to go next?
Sure. Dashing fur of wolf or fox, jars of alcohol, rocks that react to light with rust, collection cabinet of all the lost things, this extinct animal, this meteor so far from its home, homesick fish in their jars too, dead eyes slowly fading, skin turning to strings, then nothing. I love when I can't read my own handwriting when I do these things. And I'm like, what does this even say?
That's why I type. It's so much faster for me, and it's a more natural method of composition for me, but it also goes faster for me, therefore, and I can read it. Although being able to read it might not actually save this poem. Lynn, you want to finish us? Oh, not finish us off because I still have to go, but...
Sure, yeah. The dizziness in proximity to a dashing prince, like a heady dose of alcohol. We're built like this, react as our bodies necessitate chemical reactions, and yet, afterwards, we may still choose to proliferate them further, blow the palace up.
Ooh.
Interesting. The dashing count plied the debutante with alcohol, expecting a reaction he knew all too well. Lightened skirts, an enlarged libido, shame in the morning. But what he didn't know was that to her people, alcohol did far more than lightening
Dun, dun,
skirts,
dun.
and the morning found him utterly devoured.
Nom nom nom.
It's fun.
Nom nom nom, indeed. I think he deserved it. So there. We're going to do one more round, and we're going to go back to the traditional person, place, and thing. Amelia, you want to pick first?
Sure. 5.
5 is a surveyor. Amelia? I'm sorry, not Amelia. You just went. Lynn.
Did we already do 30?
We did not on this column. That's Machu Picchu. A
Is
surveyor
that how you're
in
supposed
Machu
to
Picchu.
pronounce it? I feel like I've never... Machu Picchu?
I do the best I can with it. I think that's the way you're supposed to pronounce it, but I could be dead wrong.
Very cool. I love learning new things.
10.
And a thing. Michelle?
Unless it's really bad, then I choose 11.
10? Tissue paper.
Ooh, yes,
okay. The 11 makes it easier. A death mask.
Well, I kind of like tissue paper.
All right. Begin. Bonus points if you get both tissue paper and death mask in. All right. For the fun of it, I'm going to go first this time, then I'm going to pick on all of you. The surveyor plied her lines over and around the ruins of Machu Picchu. The ancient monolithic stones would be transferred onto lines of information tissue thin, arranged in a holographic array on a generation ship, a death mask for the old world. All right, Amelia, you're up first.
Surveyors sketching lines of angled temples outside Machu Picchu and its known unknowns. Here, this curve, this line here, a map evolves that is more than a map. But what giant creature of old could have a death mask as big as the ground, acres of face in dark repose? What body underneath that trembles still?
Ooh, your interest in cryptids is coming through.
And the earthquake we got yesterday morning.
Yeah, exactly. Lynn.
I think I have to claim worst poem for this round, so I apologize in advance. Peaks and palaces, we might dream even of real things, become surveyors with more deathly masks than those of them incorrectly deemed savages. Make Machu Picchu tourism and all else besides thin as tissue paper.
No, I think you've got a point and you conveyed it, so I don't think that's worst poem.
I think it needs some work.
They all
I really
need
like
work.
those.
They all need more than 2 minutes.
Yeah, those last 2 lines were good though. Like the tissue paper works really
All right,
well.
I'm coming for your worst poem.
All right, Michelle.
The mask slips from her skull, revealing desiccated tissue paper skin, grayed by centuries beneath the Machu Picchu stones. Empty sockets blink against the new light, survey the blare of sun and curious stares. Then, annoyed, she pulls the mask back on and curls up again.
I like that one. I don't see why that one would be worst poem either.
Yeah, the humor was like surprising and then really enjoyable.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Do you guys feel like a final round, or are we good here?
I think my brain is kind of squeezed out.
Yeah.
Okay. 4 or 5 rounds is usually about where it goes. So we'll stop there. All right. Do any of you have any recent projects that you'd like to talk about, or that any upcoming projects that might be coming out soon that people should be looking for? I'll start with Amelia because I know you've got the warm sonnets.
Yeah, I just had a micro chapbook come out with the Quarter Press. It's called The Worm Sonnets. It does what it says on the label. There are a lot of worms in it. See, it's imagines a world where everything except parasitic nematodes have stopped existing, and how these kind of clouds of parasitic nematodes interact with each other.
Wow, that's so
what
exciting.
I love about it, since I finished reading it recently, and I cannot recommend it highly enough, is the fact that these worms create this negative space around where the people used to be, and they still interact, and they still love, and they still hate, and all the things that we do as humans, but they do it in a wormy way, and it's wonderful. And don't be deterred by the fact that it's about worms, is what I'm saying. It's also about humans and how we relate. So, Lynne, do you have anything coming out soon or recently out that you'd like to talk about?
My last collection came out in 2020, so it's not new at this point, but A Refuge of Tales is out from Renaissance Press. I think it's like $3 if you buy the ebook version, so pretty accessible. I do not have any new collections coming out yet, although I have. See, my problem is that I'm like kind of writing 3 different collections at the same time, and neither of them are quite long enough yet to do anything with.
Happens. Michelle, do you have anything out recently that you'd like to talk about, or anything coming out in the near future? It can be prose too.
That requires me to write enough things that relate to each other in some way. I tend to keep going all over the place. But I guess if you want to go prose, Pseudopod just pulled out the podcast a few weeks ago, I think, that has my reprint, Bitter as the Sea and Bright. If you like really horrific seaside tales told from the universal we. Well, you should take a listen.
Yes.
I do.
I love that.
I like those things very much.
That it's a very poetic story as well, because you don't write anything that doesn't have poetry in it. Even your prose is poetic, so it's beautiful and terrible at the same time. It is truly, in the old sense of the term, awful, full of awe. So yeah, I highly recommend people check that one out. It's really good. I personally just had in 2023 through Aqueduct Press, my collection called From Voyages Unreturning is out and available. I think it's like $5. It's a volume it's basically a novella in verse about a person who has lost their family to the effects of time and spaceflight and everything like that, and how they take solace with a living ship, and how they are tempted by the possibility of time travel to undo their decisions, and then they have to decide, no, I have to live with my decisions and go forward in time, not back in time. And it sounds very reductive when I put it that way, but I think it's fun.
Nice.
So if anybody wants to check that out, it's at Aqueduct Press. This is going to be a shorter than average podcast, but that's fine because we don't have to have them all drag on forever and ever. Thank you all for having been on the podcast. It was a delight getting to speak with all of you.
Thank you.
And for the next 2 weeks, thank you so much. For the next 2 weeks, the topic will be translation and writing in English as your second language. My guests next time will be Anatoly Belilovsky and Alex Schwartzman. This has been Shining Moon. Thank you very much.